Okay, welcome. Welcome everyone to Stillness and Chaos. I've got Kemp Battle, and Kemp, I thought we'd just start with a little bit of music.
I love it. There you go.
Yeah, Alexa's like, what do you want to say?
Right. Wait, let's just forget talking. Let's listen to the music.
Yeah.
Which way the wind blows when this day is done.
It says breathe in the air. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniel. I'm the founder of Because You. And I truly believe that all of us are wise, joyful, beautiful human beings. And sometimes a mental health issue, emotional distress, grief, whatever it is, kind of clouds who we are as human beings. So my purpose in life is to firstly go on this journey myself, see myself as this beautiful, joyful, creative human being, but also support others to see that. And Stillness and Chaos is one of the ways that I'm doing it. It's an important kind of a way to think about mental health and well-being and inner leadership, and the fact that it's a continuous journey that is for life, and it's a beautiful journey. So I have awesome guests like Kemp every single couple of weeks. We talk about lots of things under the sun. Today we're going to talk about how do we find stillness and chaos, and Kemp will share some wisdom, and we'll have a conversation, and we'll see where it goes. So Kemp, I thought maybe we could. Oh, okay. So also we, this is a streaming platform, Kemp, that I can, see, we can see comments and questions and reflections. So people who are watching, please feel free to share anything that you want, reflections, appreciations, questions. We'd really like to get your wisdom and your perspectives, so that it's not just the two of us talking. Thank you, Dana. I love this song too. Poonam, just seeing you made me smile, Kemp. Ah, oh, sweet.
She knows the feeling is mutual.
Love it. So Kemp, instead of doing the professional, awesome, you've got a rich life, you've got varied interests, you kind of work at the intersection of strategy, innovation, leadership, all of that awesome stuff. You're an investor in the genomic industry. And something that struck me is how being a hospice worker has really transformed you and lived your life, right? So you've had a rich, beautiful life, varied interests. You're a doting father who's just come back from a beautiful trip to Ireland. But for me, what stands out is you have a big heart, you have a big head. Not literally, but you're just very clever, and you're an old wise soul, and you kind of see something in people that we don't see ourselves. And I've had the benefit of being on the receiving end of it so many times. So I just want to say huge gratitude to you, especially because of you, I feel I've started my own spiritual journey, at least consciously, and I'll always have to thank you for that. So Chris, sorry, I keep calling Chris because Chris is
such a dear friend. Chris, we both.
I know, right?
Yeah,
he's such a dear friend, and he's always in our consciousness. So Chris,
before you do a gracious pivot, I can see it coming. Let me and gratitude's the right frame to start this conversation, because our friendship now is almost a couple of decades, and I just want to thank you for the work you're doing in the world, because the intersection of leadership and mental health and authentic conversation this is the time for it. It's required. And you've done a lot to sharpen your blade and polish your own heart. And so I just tip my hat to you. And I'm like anybody else that you talk to. You could ask anybody you wanted to come talk to you, and they would say yes because of who you are. So thank you for that. And thank you for the good, hard work of doing this.
Thank you, dear kind sir. If we keep saying Chris in this conversation, is because he's a dear friend and he's always present and he's so wise. So
yeah,
he's
Chris, wherever you are, we acknowledge you and we welcome you to this gathering for sure.
Yeah,
and I have by the way, every time you call me Chris, It's totally fine. I have no concerns.
Okay, good.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
So, so Kemp, the reason I started Stillness and Chaos is, I've been on this journey of dealing with my mental health, which has been, rocky over the last 10, 12 years. And I feel um, kind of, kind of trying to distill it into a phrase is literally saying, how do I find stillness in the chaos of my life? And it's been a journey. It's been a beautiful, incredible journey. And we were just talking about this. And it's given me it's helped me in many ways, and it's been difficult in many ways. So, that's kind of why stillness and chaos, and it's really important to me. But if I had to ask you that question, right? So what does stillness and chaos mean to you? What comes up for you?
Well, it's actually embedded in the way you spoke about your own life, both with its what you called its rockiness and its benefit. I mean, I think let's just take a step back for a moment and look at some assumptions we've baked into stillness and chaos.
Mm.
I think stillness, we bake in the assumption of it's good, it's spiritual, it's meditative, reflective, it's yoga, it's contemplative prayer. Stillness, it's the grail. Chaos, we make the assumption it's bad, it's disconnected, it's wild, it's confusing, it's rocky, it's a problem. And so our task is to get the good thing out of that bad thing. When I was thinking about talking to you today, I was thinking about reversing it for a moment. Anyone who is passionate about stillness and the good things of stillness will recognize that the act of trying to be still is the single most chaotic act there is. That finding the chaos in stillness is almost effortless. Anyone who's tried to meditate, the mind is filled and filled and filled. And that doesn't change as one practices, right? I mean, we'd like to say it does. We'd like to show some affect that somehow we've managed to be still in the midst of this maelstrom of life. That's nonsense. This maelstrom of life is the stillness. And so one thing I think we can do as we talk today is let's not let ourselves get binary that we're trying to find something special in something commoditized, when in fact what we're really trying to do is explore what is some of the rockiest things in your life are the most valuable things in your life. Agreed?
Yeah, for sure.
So some of the most chaotic periods of your life have opened you to stillness. Agreed?
Agreed.
So I think in that regard, what I love about your program and your question is that we want to kind of get underneath the words and the concepts. We just want to get into the practices. How do we practice chaos? How do we practice chaos? Because it's a pathway to stillness. And how do we practice stillness? Well, it's a direct pathway to chaos. So I'm not trying to be quirky here. I'm just simply trying to say that we want to be careful as we talk about this, that we keep opening ourselves to what the assumptions are. And for me, I think one thing that's true about chaos and stillness that they share is that it's an internal process. The mayhem of the world is ongoing and can't be stopped. The mayhem inside me is ongoing and can't be stopped. But the relationship inside me of what I can control or not control, but what I can explore and be curious is, I think, why we're here on this planet. So I think what it means to me is that it means stillness and chaos rather than in chaos. And what can I learn from both? Is that a fair way to start?
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to start. And as you said it, I think you're right. I mean, It's interesting because I feel one of the reasons I started Because You is because I am so convinced that if we go through this journey, whether it's the mental health journey, the inner journey, in a very intentional way, it actually unleashes our wisdom, our creativity, our who we are and who we're meant to be, right? And usually that happens when there are these rocks and there are these really difficult things that happen. So I'm totally with you on the chaos can actually be that beautiful um, piece. And at the same time, I know that when you're in that chaos, perhaps it's difficult to look at it that way, right? And sometimes you can look at the chaos afterwards saying, oh, I see, that is, that's what I can learn from it, or that's what it meant to me. Because when you're in the chaos, in my case, I'm talking about deep, very like difficult, mental health moments, right? It's very difficult to kind of see the bigger picture. um, so it's good to have that perspective, and I kind of see how it can be the other way as well.
I love the way you're putting that. I mean, listen, we know what the extremes are, right? We know that there are not many of us who can choose the contemplative life, um, and live a life in which stillness is the daily expression of their practice. We know that extraordinarily admirable as it is, for many of us who have to navigate the world or have a job and do what's being asked of us and look after our families, that stillness can seem almost an indulgence. We also know that when you're in chaos, you can't make meaning from anything. You're in a reactive mode. So I think at the extremes, it's easy for us to say either extreme, while having its virtues and its interests, are not conducive to a life where you're navigating with others in systems and in networks and trying to do good work and trying to look after your loved ones. So what I love about this kind of conversation is how do we navigate stillness and chaos in our lives in a way that not only unleashes ourselves but unleashes others. I have small children, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I have an impact on them. I have older children, and I have seen my impact on them, and so I recognize that there is in fact a consequence of when you're both conscious of what you're doing and when you're not conscious of what you're doing, when you're in a kind of stillness where you can make meaning more clearly, or a chaos where you're trying to navigate. It has impacts on others. And I think as long as we can learn to navigate with skill and presence, I think we help those around us on the team, in our work, in our families.
And I feel the reframe that you just did, that stillness doesn't have to be awesome and chaos doesn't have to be really bad. I think that's an amazing thing to have, right? Kind of like, now that I'm thinking about it, the next time when the chaos comes, I'm like, okay, chaos is there. I don't know how to deal with it, but at some point, I'll think about Kemp, and maybe it will think. So I love that. Come back to when you say it has an impact on you. You've kind of practiced this and been thinking about this for a long time, stillness and chaos. Share a couple of moments perhaps in your life where this has been really relevant to you, right?
Right.
Something that perhaps has shaped you in some ways.
Right. Well, I naturally, intuitively go back to hard learnings, right? I mean, when I trained as a facilitator, I remember a moment where I had a facilitation assignment with a public company board, and there was a lot of anxiety about this upcoming board meeting. And as is customary for a good facilitator, you interview everybody who's coming. I interviewed everybody very deeply. Didn't go to bed the night before thinking about how to map all this out, navigate all these varying constituencies and what they needed and what they wanted. And I got in and I opened the meeting, and I spent the first sort of 20 minutes, and I was brilliant. I mean, I just was like, when I nailed everything. I got the whole thing done. And when I was finished, the room was about as still as a lake.
This is a good story. I can feel it coming.
Yeah, it's coming like a freight train. And in my head, I literally could hear a voice say, "You got what you want?
Yeah.
Are you done now? Can we get to work, or do you need more? Does your ego need more here? You want to control this scene even more, or can we actually help them get to work now?" And it was clear that I had the chaos. I had taken in the chaos. I'd become the chaos, and I thought my job is to reduce the chaos to all kinds of solutions, all kinds of things. I neutralized every voice in the room by providing a way of seeing that voice. And it all worked incredibly well for me. And it doesn't work at all for them. And that was a turning point for me, because I think I then began to realize that the way in which I had facilitated was identifying the people that I agreed with and helping them move the group along. And in some sense, negating the people I thought were slowing us down or were outright wrong, and figuring out how to move them along while not wasting too much time. The actual opposite of what good facilitation should be. I mean, the opposite. And so I say to those clients in those early years of learning how to facilitate, I offer my apologies. And the irony is that it can look like you're doing good work, but you're not. And you're not doing good work because what's present is not coming up and out. What needs to be spoken. The reason why chaos is so beautiful is that it is not refined. It's raw, and it's saying, make meaning of this. And so when you say make meaning of this, there is a requisite internal stillness you have to meet the chaos straight on. You have to be able to say, I'm going to let this meeting get out of control, because whatever is coming out is what we can work with. You cannot facilitate that way unless internally you're not still like the bodhisattva. You're just still like, this will work. There is meaning here. Wait and be present. And sometimes the meeting veers and people will look at you and say, this meeting is out of control. This is a waste of time. This is absurd. I don't know any 2-day strategic retreat that on the night of the first night, I'm not lying awake in bed thinking, well, the whole thing has gone to hell. That's the sign that you're doing work that's useful to people. So I think that's an example, I think, of where I early in my career, or not even early, I'm learning it even now all the time. But I'm recognizing that trying to be present to what is my only task. Not to manage it or shape it or direct it.
Yeah. And it's so counterintuitive, right? Because it goes against every grain in our body right now. It says this has to be efficient. This has to be, I'm being paid to do this.
Yep.
How do I? It's always, especially in a coaching conversation or whatever, you always, if you're not just being completely present with that person or the group, it's actually a disservice. So
and who can blame us, right? We don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But we don't know what we're doing. We've never been with this group before. We've never had this moment in time. This group will never be together again like this again.
Yeah.
Why does my little anxious ego cling to me and say,
you're
going to think you're an idiot?
Yeah. I was just going to go to that ego, right? Because it kind of says that there's so much of work that's needed that almost has to have that zoomed out view of saying, okay, stop being that person who needs to control everything. And the second part is, and I think we've learned this the hard way, is kind of trusting the process is so important, right? We kind of do the work, and at the same time, we trust that if we let the chaos go, it'll come out beautifully in some ways. And I remember on our programs, especially at the end of day 1 or day 2, like there is some breakdown that happens in a group, right? And I think we've kind of, how do you sit with that is actually really difficult and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I'm very lucky. I have good partners who understand the beauty of action, and who are in some ways commanders in their own right, and they remind me that command and action is another way of plunging into the heart of chaos. And they command and they act in a kind of state of stillness, and they will sometimes legitimately be very frustrated with me because, one of my colleagues likes to say, if he's taking us into a kind of battle, he'll say, well, I'm the medic, and the chief officer always keeps the medic very close at hand.
Yeah.
And sometimes the medic can be tending to things when the battle is in full motion. And so the wonderful tension that we often play with is the tension between, what he might think of as too much talk, and he might be right, and I might think of as necessary communication, and I might be right. But the nice thing about our way of working is that we don't harden around one or the other. It's the friction that we keep going. And so I think there's that moment where you can say, hey, this is all a lot of what we're talking about right now. You got to get stuff done. Come on, let's go. And there's a lot of wisdom there. A lot of wisdom there.
Yeah.
So
I was just wondering.
Very attention to my acting commanders.
I was just wondering if anyone's watching and they're like, this is a chaotic conversation.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
That's the point of it, people.
Yeah. By the end, though, there might be one person left who probably fell asleep at the console, but I think this is the process by which, even in this conversation, you and I are trying to figure out, what are we really here to talk about? That's what makes this fun.
Yeah. So you talked about the professional example, right? Share a little bit maybe about something personal that, you can share whatever you're comfortable with, but anything that comes to mind as you're thinking about this phrase.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have a long rocky history as well. And I think that I have finally understood that my orientation to grievance or being wronged or done poorly by is really a fruitless inquiry. The only inquiry that's fruitful is, how have I done wrong? How have I not, what's the legacy of my loving? Not necessarily the legacy of how others have loved me. And so I think I'm an old dog. I just turned 68 this month, and I'm just now beginning to understand how important that is to every time I hear myself frame my judgments around another's behavior, to say, as our friend Gene Early always used to say, how is that true of me? And that practice is the single most valuable practice. And I think it keeps me in touch with being a learner. And the thing I would say at this stage in my life is I am realizing that I can't afford too much time spending time with people who aren't learners. I don't have enough time. You have lots of time, but none of us know how much time we have. But the point is, learners are always willing to come home to self and say, okay, what am I doing here? There's so much argument and so much division and so much judgment flooding us these days that I think my task is to keep the world safe from me and tend to my own field, which I'm trying to do more and more. And so I would say this, looking back, I now look back, and instead of seeing people or situations that I feel I was wrongly treated, I look back and can see a long history of my own unconscious behavior, my own judgments. And as I said to you before, judgments masked as wisdom, the wise guy, when he's actually not a wise guy. He's just delivering his little surgical opinion because it makes him feel good about something that happened to him. I have to stay in constant vigilance around what's going on in here. And it not only in here, but in here, in heart and head. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not
The
sure that
leg-
answers your question, but it's a little vague, maybe.
No, that's good. Let's go keep going. So the legacy of my loving. Um, I'm loving that. The legacy of my loving. Share a couple of things. If you think about that legacy of my loving, what is your legacy of your loving?
Wow, you're catching me at a moment where, in a live conversation, that's a painful subject, simply because there are legacies of my loving that I want to not undo, but I guess I can feel that they are not legacies that I'm as proud of. And I think for me, the question of the day is, how do I be proud of it now? I think this is the distinction often of having. I'm really lucky to have had two sets of children at different stages of my life, and my daughter and son, my oldest daughter and son. I was a 30-year-old trying to make his mark in the world, and how present was I to what they were discovering, what they were trying to learn, what they needed to learn. How much was I answering their questions instead of saying, "That's a really good question. What do you think?" I think I was a 30-year-old or 30 to 40, 45-year-old who thought when they asked me a question, they wanted an answer. So I was full of answers, and it was bullshit. Now I'm practicing no answers at all for the 6 and 8-year-olds, saying to them, "Yeah, wow, what how what do you think of that? What do you think of that? That's great. What's that about?" And I see that they never really were asking me for my opinion. They were asking me to listen to theirs. So for my older children, the legacy of my loving is not one that I'd like to have back in some ways, and I have opportunity, and they are both generous in giving me the opportunity to change that legacy. But I'm aware of the distinction for sure.
And what a gift to your children at the moment. And I relate to that so much, right? I feel having a 5-year-old, I'm asked a million questions every single day, and I'm going to keep this very present. And I think any parent who's watching this, or actually anyone, right? It's anyone who wants to, I guess, be with another person. Sometimes doesn't need to have very quick answers, but especially for parents, I think it's so important in shaping your child, not shaping your child, but kind of just being there for your child.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're not there for your child, and you might try to tell yourself for all the right reasons, you're trying to navigate the chaos, you're trying to look after your family. The fact is that the difficulty of legacy is that it's a legacy that they're left to deal with. They're left to make sense of. You can't go back and say, "Oh, look, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry that I did, or wish I'd been more. Wish I'd asked more." You can't do that to them. Their job is to just see if they can release the legacies that they don't need. I think there are some legacies that I've given that I hope they do hold to, and will serve them in their adult lives, in their full adult lives, in their aging process. I hope, but I'm not. I get that that I have to remind myself that what I do now is the only way I can actually redeem anyone, including and most especially myself. What I choose to do in this moment. Who wants to, on a live conversation, talk about the legacy of their parenting? Not me, but your invitation is one I can't duck, right? So,
And thank you for going there. I mean, when you said it's painful, I mean, again, this may be very personal, but I guess it's coming from that, your children from that first period of your life. And I hear you kind of saying, what do I do now? And if your children are watching this, or actually they don't need to watch this, they see you as who you are, and your being, the way of being is probably very different from what it was 30 years ago. um, so maybe part of the it's that maybe there's nothing to do, and they'll see you as who you are, and hopefully that's enough for you and for them.
Well, isn't it true? Let's come back to you and me. I mean, isn't it true that one of the havens of judgment is I see you for who you are, which is really who you were.
Mm,
And it's not, no one can be blamed for saying who you are is the only who that I know. I mean, it's not required that my older children know who I am now. They have the legacy of dealing with who was I then, when I was gone for long periods of time and missing out on important events and not paying the kind of exquisite attention that they deserved.
mm,
So can I say to them, "Oh no, wait, things have changed. I get it now. I get it." No, I mean there are. We're all caught up in what we experienced and what we know, and I think that's part of why the notion of realizing that the grievances and the sorrows and the mistakes that I've made, my only task is now to just own them and
mm.
try not to keep making them, which I do every day, by the way. I make those
I,
mistakes every day. Yeah. And that's, I think, relative to this conversation, I think that's what's so tricky, right? Because it's so easy to talk in exalted language. I mean, stillness can be a poetic term, and presence, and a deep reverent listening, and all the good things that we know. They have a kind of poetry and a passion about them, but the
mm,
practice is effing hard. It's
yeah,
hard, and it
yeah,
requires you to bite your tongue and say, wait a minute, I know I feel outraged right now, or I feel wronged right now, or I feel hurt right now, but just take a step back here. Let's just take a step back. That is the moment of inviting stillness into chaos, not to ameliorate the chaos or make it go away, but to befriend it.
yeah.
In the same way that one could be in stillness by the lake daydreaming and then ask oneself, have you called your family member, or have
Yeah.
you done what you need to do? Sometimes the chaos of life needs to grab you by the side of the lake and
Yeah.
say, it's time to do your taxes. So
Yeah.
it's a
And,
tricky business.
you don't need to befriend it, right? Sometimes it's just, maybe you just need to meet it and
Right.
see what's happening. So let's do it right now. So let's take a step back. And Kemp, how are you feeling? What are you feeling? And where are you?
Well, I notice the anxiety of having stepped into a very personal moment in an unexpected way. So I'm aware of a trace of anxiety there. Vulnerability isn't something I worry, but anxiety is my way. So then I'm noticing, why is anxiety rather than vulnerability? It's that you don't, I can feel that part of me that wants to be seen in a certain way. I want to be considered in a certain way. It would be nice to be seen differently. So that's an interesting vanity. My orientation is toward my challenges, as you can see. So I'm aware of vanity and anxiety, a certain excitement that isn't this what we should be doing?
Mhm.
I certainly feel a tinge of gratitude, both to you and to me, for recognizing that however haphazard this is, it's some attempt to try to speak to issues that are important.
Mm.
I feel grateful.
Mm.
How about you? What are you noticing?
I wouldn't say anxiety. I feel, um, I feel I might have put you on the spot, so I'm feeling that responsibility, but actually it's very light because I can, I know that um, this is what we're born to do. So I know it'll be, I know you'll hold it in whatever way you need to hold it. And you're right. This for me is why I do what I do, right? I think it's not about just talking about the difficult stuff, but it's kind of trying to uncover what's there. And what you said about being a parent and not being there and being there is actually very present for me right now, because I feel I've kind of designed my life around my child, um, and part of me always wonders if it's me overcompensating for what I didn't have with my dad, right? And I think it's kind of at the back of my mind, and I try to have that balance, and I think that's kind of it's probably something that it's a cycle that we go as parents and children and parents and children. And I know my wife and I have talked about how do we kind of break some of these patterns of the trauma that we may or may not have got from our parents. So that's what is present for me.
Do you, when you look at your working life, the world where chaos has its home, how do you navigate? Making meaning from chaos when you have, your own sense of Iraqi history and your own sense of being good at some things and not at others, and overcompensating with your 5-year-old? How in your working life, for those who are here and are saying, hey, this is all good, but is this just two guys talking about their personal lives, or are they tunneling towards something I can use? And that's the only, in the end, isn't our only job as leaders to make other leaders? So what can someone use from the chaos that you've had to navigate? What's usable?
The first thing that comes to mind is I feel we try and you immediately talk to working life and personal, and there felt like there was a wall. And I've at least I've realized, and I know this true, is it cannot be a wall. I feel anything that the work that you do on your personal life and your trauma and all that kind of stuff like flows into your working life, right? And at least when I work on myself and my child and my parents and all that kind of stuff, it suddenly makes me kind of see in others what I may have gone through or whatever. So I would say the working relationships suddenly have a different texture, right? What you talked about previously of kind of taking a step back and kind of taking a pause before responding, I think that is one of the most useful things I've found, right? Especially in a conversation where there are big egos in the room. How can you be that person who can actually be the bridge, find ways to find the stillness within yourself in a way that's you're really present, and then respond and kind of connect with each person at where they are. That's what's coming up for me right now.
That's interesting. I mean, two things that come to mind. One is, of course, that when you're in a room full of big egos, the first big ego you have to deal with is your own, without doubt. The very notion that the egos around you are big is a signal of your own big ego, without doubt, in my mind. But the other thing you said, which I really love, is that the division between personal and professional is one of the great lies of, particularly in the business world. It's one of the great lies. It was designed and implemented by people who were fundamentally afraid of their interior life. And so the reason we know it's a lie is because every system to which all of us belong want us to be engaged, want us to be passionate, want us to be connected, want us to be doing good collaborative work, want us to be listening, want us to be communicating. But when we get emotional, when we slip, when we over communicate, when we find ourselves in a place where chaos is bringing up something live right in the moment and vulnerability is required, then the system says, no, 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 we don't want that. We don't want that. Think about how women have suffered, the notion that women are emotional at times of important business decisions. That's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. So it's designed to keep people in place. So one of the things that I know you've been committed to, and some of the systems you and I have worked together in, Leaders Quest has been committed to it, and is that our personal life is our professional life. Our professional life is our personal life. If I am different to my 8-year-old than I am to you as my colleague at work, what is that difference? Why am I different? On some basic level, I shouldn't be different at all, content-wise, of course. So I like this notion of trying to help us all unleash ourselves to bring our personal and our professional lives into alignment. It doesn't mean that you can't be disciplined about it and have an etiquette. And if I, burst into shouting in the middle of a meeting because I feel emotional, I get it. That's not what I'm talking about. But I am being able to say, my ability to say, I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm really confused at the moment. I don't know what we're talking about. And I feel like it's going in a direction that no one's speaking, but everyone knows it's going. Where is it going? That kind of question as a facilitator now is the question that I would ask. And that's because I have to notice my own internal state. It's not because I'm some wise facilitator that's going to guide the group to the next level of thinking. I have to bring my emotional intuition into the room. And it's embarrassing. Everyone could look at me and say, actually, no, we all know where we're going. You're the one. You don't know the content. Quiet. Fine. I can do that. But more often than not, when we bring our internal and personal selves to the table, we deepen it for everyone.
Yeah, I hear you. I totally, align with that. And, what I'm seeing over the last few years, especially in the last 2-3 years, is we've suddenly flipped from, not bringing our personal lives into the professional lives. And now there's too much of bringing your whole self into work, and that kind of translates into, kind of, there's an overemphasis of, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling triggered, there's a lot of trauma, and these words are just being thrown out. And especially if you're a manager and you have young people coming and telling you this, you have no idea what to do because you still have a deadline to hit. And I want to be empathetic, but how the hell do I deal with that? Right? So I feel it's kind of it's an interesting time to be in, because I feel we're kind of completely reversing what has been done for a long time. In pockets, obviously not everywhere, but I'm seeing this trend as well, and it's difficult for people, especially in the workplace, to deal with that.
It is, and remember, we don't have a vocabulary for that other side right now. The way you're describing it is a kind of binary way. We've gone too far. There's too much emotion. Too much. That's not true. It's not that there's too much. It's that we don't have the tools and the skills to integrate. But it's understandable when we've come from a rigid place where emotion is considered to be, it's like hard and soft skills. That's another classic lie. The hard skills that business.
But I'm not even talking about emotion, right? Because I feel there's something about emotion, but I feel I'm talking a little bit more around kind of people oversharing, kind of saying, this is what's happening in my life, and it's really like, I'm really anxious, I don't know if I'll be able to do this work for 2 days. And it's fine if it happens once or twice, but kind of bringing your whole self to life, it kind of paralyzes others as well. And maybe this is a mental health thing as well.
That moment, I'm overwhelmed. I don't think I can do this for the next 2 days. I feel triggered. I'm overwhelmed. if you are looking at that person right then as the mechanism of an outcome that you need, in 2 days, you need to deliver a report. And your job and your bonus is dependent on that report being good.
Yeah.
And the person who's central to that report is now coming in and oversharing with you the fact that they're having a little bit of a difficult time.
Yeah.
If your response to that person is, let's take our binary of stillness and chaos. If your response is the response of the monk that comes in and says, it's all good, you're going to die someday, relax, let's close our eyes, calm, the likelihood of your success is probably 0. If, on the other hand, you do what I hear could be done, which is, we don't have time for this. We don't have time. We have 2 days, less than 2 days. And your job is dependent on it. So is mine. So just move on. We got to get this done. That's as useless as the monk in some ways. The question is, in that 2 minutes, is there an opportunity to say, what is this anxiety an example of? What is it a result of? You don't need to care about the content. You don't need the story about how they had a car accident on the way and the way their mother is sick. And you don't need any of that. But you could hold your presence long enough to say, let's pause for a moment and let's ask ourselves, what is this anxiety an example? Oh, well, and they go into the content and you say, no, what's it all an example of? What's the thing? There is a possibility that in that dialogue, you will at least allow someone to find their own bearings. Because when they've come to you, they don't have their bearings. And you can't make them a functional person by force. So then you could say, but what if I don't have those skills? We all have those skills. We all do. And so the pause, I think this is where your pause is. And even if the pause is, Kemp, you seem out of control. You seem, do I need to find someone else to do this? What do you need from me that might help you kind of get back in your skin? How can I be of use to you? If they can't make heads or tails of it and you've got 2 days for your report, you're going to have to move. But I think when the orientation is that someone's chaos triggers my fear of that chaos, I can't afford this right now. I think we then say it's too much sharing. I don't believe there's too much sharing. I think you just redirect what the sharing really is an example of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot. Thank you for that. I love how you're reframing a lot of my stuff. Why that's really helpful is again, I'm hearing this a lot, right? And I feel I've fallen into the trap as well. And what you've done is you've helped me see that we are seeing the binary, and is there a middle way? And that pause, literally saying pause and stepping back, both for you and that person, is really helpful. But also then you're seeing the other person, and them feeling seen is actually really important. And the second thing, what you said about, I don't have the skills, that's also something, and I fall into that. I maybe, again, it's my ego thing saying, I can do this, but I don't know if someone else can do it, and so on. And you're saying everyone has the skills, and you're totally right. In many ways, we do, right? All we have to do is do what you said.
Right. It's so interesting, isn't it, that that moment when the person has just shattered your plan with their own dysfunction, their own grief. It could be a holy reason. It could be a petulant reason. You don't know. All you know is that Kemp is here saying, I can't do this work. I have to go home. I need a mental health day. And the report's due tomorrow. It is interesting that rather than thinking about what skills do I have to make this person do what I want them to do, what skills do I have to name for this person where I am right now? I realize that as I listen to you, I am now anxious for your job and mine. I realize that I'm trying hard to listen to you, but I'm realizing that what we both face is a moment, a very important moment. We have to get this done. How do you help me with that anxiety? I mean, it's uncanny what happens when people feel the authenticity of the moment as opposed to rhetorical advice and counsel. That's why this notion of the wise person giving advice and counsel is just such nonsense. I mean, elders, the traditional elder. I remember on a quest that I think you and I did a quest right after this. I mentioned it many times because it's so vivid to me. But you know, when that guy who was the campaign manager for Mandela was telling me that, you know, he was 27 and Mandela was asking him what he should say and he was overwhelmed. And I say, God, what did you do? And he said, well, I was really lucky. I had my elders. And I still can remember the feeling I had when I said to him almost gratuitously, well, it's so great that you had people who could give you advice and counsel. I could feel the words coming out of my mouth and I could see what was coming toward me was a massive teaching, because he looked at me like I was crazy and tilted his head kind of like, what? He said, well, these are my elders. And so they don't give advice and counsel. And I said, what do they do? Knowing the diamond bullet was coming right here. He said, they listen and ask questions. So in that moment when Kemp comes and is completely disintermediated and unintegrated and a mess, can you take that moment, that 10 minutes, maybe 15, maybe 20, all of which every second feels like it's an hour because you've got only so many minutes left before the report's due. But can you take that moment and listen and ask questions? Their temperature level will drop. Their breath will come back. They will sense a stillness in the chaos because they're pure chaos at that moment. And you can't ask them to go to pure stillness, but you can ask them to remember, oh, right. This may not be so serious right now. Or maybe I can pick this up tomorrow. I don't know. I mean, I just know that in that story of the person of Kemp coming to you, the process has nothing to do with them. It has to do with you. Can you find the stillness to say, all right, let's settle down for a sec. What's happening? What is this an example of? How old do you feel right now? What's going on? People go, oh yeah, that's psychotherapy. No, it's not. It's human connection. So can you take that moment? Are you brave enough to take that moment? Or are you so determined to get the report and get the bonus and not look like a fool and not get fired and not lose your home and be on the streets begging because you didn't get the report in? Do all of those hallucinations swirl around you so much that all you do is think, I got to get this car on the road, even though the transmission's not working. I got to push it to the next gas station. I don't think so. I think your job is to figure out the carburetor or the thing needs water. I know nothing about cars. The radiator's empty. The radiator is what I meant.
You know why I'm smiling? Because it feels like right at the end of the conversation, we've kind of got so much of practical stuff. When you're at work and someone comes, how do you find it? I love it. We've got from chaos a little bit of.
But isn't it, Daniel? Isn't it great in the end? If any of this can't relate to that, if it can't get back to being eminently practical, let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. Got to figure out how to move through the world.
I agree. And if I had to come back to what you said, right? They feel it. They feel the stillness. I think that's it. Like the two things you said, it's not their work, it's ours. It's not about the story, it's about the process. And Gene, our friend, says it's all about energetic presence, right? When you are still, the other person will feel it. And the opposite is also the same. And actually doing the work on ourselves is actually 100 times more difficult. And the opportunity is beautiful, like you just said, because immediately you can either bring down the temperature, take a pause, and then go from there. So I love how you've kind of done it very practically, but also beautiful way. And I just want to call out what you said about therapy, right? And therapy is humanist. It's I mean, I'm not a therapist, and I know I've had the fortune and misfortune of seeing good and bad therapists, and I feel the ones I really connect to are the ones who are, who connect at a very human level. And I met so many people who are not professionally qualified who connect at that level, and that makes it, that's what makes it authentic and real, and that's what people respond to in my experience.
I think that's true. And I think, I think the work that they did, I guess it was out of Google, in which they tried to understand what made the most effective
Yeah.
teams.
Project Aristotle. Yeah.
Yeah. And that answer of safety, people feeling safe, and safe just means I can be who I am without having everybody hallucinate about it. It has direct impact on the efficacy of people at work. Direct impact. I mean, the amount of time. I mean, the only reason I think people like you or I are often hired is because we're simply, the room has lost the hallucinations are greater than what's there, and so they sometimes need to have just a voice that can be present to all the hallucinations and ask questions, listen and ask questions. So I think the good
I
news
love
is
it.
this is
Why should you hire us? Because we see through your hallucinations, listen and ask questions. I love it. That's what I'm going to write on my LinkedIn.
yeah. Well, there you go. I don't know that anybody should hire us with the two of us, given who we are. But I do know that groups work more effectively when they trust one another. I facilitated a group of folk around a fantastic DEI initiative, and we had 20 some people in our very first meeting. And the opening question, which I don't think I'd love to tell you that I had the vision for this opening question. I was just in a panic for a good opening question. And the opening question that I stumbled on was, what did your family of, when you were born into your family of origin, what expectations were you born into? What were the expectations that surrounded you when you were born into your family of origin? When we were done, it was a 2-hour meeting. The check-in, which this is a check-in question, was the whole 2 hours.
Oh.
When we were done, this group created such a solidarity that we are now 3.5 years after the group finished its work. We still look forward to reunions and gatherings, and people suddenly, some people will call for a meeting and we'll all show up. That intimacy was created in one meeting, 2-hour meeting. The work we did was collectively some of our best work, and it was a result of authentic, vulnerable, and it ultimately was a room that was safe because everybody played. What's that worth for a business person?
Yeah. And I always say, I'm going to do a plug here. I always say, the intention for Stillness and Chaos conversations, why I do this is kind of, vulnerable, authentic, meaningful conversations. And, kind of you reflected that back to me. And I feel, do you think we've had one of those today?
We have. We have. And the way we have is because I have no idea if we have, which is a very good thing. If I were noticing my own internal state going, well, that was a great conversation, we really got that one, then we blew it. Instead, I'm wobbly kneed and going, I hope that was useful.
Who knows? It was fun for me. It was deep and meaningful, and everything from philosophical to practical.
Right.
We'll hear back.
I think at one moment I did suggest putting water in a carburetor, so that gives you some idea how practical we got. Thank you.
My God! Thank you
for your work and for framing this conversation, and I really appreciate the time. It was really fun.
Thank you for taking the time, Kemp. It's such a joy. And I want to say this is our first conversation after 12 years.
Yeah,
I just want to say that
we actually have not physically spoken for 12 years.
And it feels like we just take it off from when we last met.
You know what? Let's make note of that. That this conversation is the first conversation we've had in 12 years, 12 momentous years for both of us. Lots of changes. Have we caught up on what those changes are? Have we filled one another in on the content? We haven't. Yeah. But we but we can look at this conversation later and see that both of us are telling the other everything they're thinking about in their life at this moment. That's the effect of stillness and chaos. That's the fruit of, is it stillness or is it chaos? It's both. So great work.
Right back at you. I can't say anything more. That is beautiful way to end. And thank you for being you and doing this for me. And for those who are joining, thank you for being here. If anyone's still here, that's lovely.
They left a long time ago, Daniel. They left a long time ago.
Just you and me.
If you picked up one of those guitars and played, they might have stayed.
No, I'm sure people appreciate this. Thank you, Kemp. Just stay back for 2 minutes before I end. Okay? All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. I've got an awesome guest next week as well. Not as good as Kemp, but hopefully she won't see it. But yeah, see you. Thank you. Good night.